Vamos a pasar ahora como a otro bloque. Pues he hablado de democracia radical y aprovechando que tenemos con nosotras tanto a Manahan como a Joana, militantes del movimiento feminista, pues queríamos hacerles preguntas relacionadas, en el caso de Manahan, sobre el rol del movimiento feminista en las transformaciones urbanas en su contexto, que es en Filipinas.
Thank you very much, Yolanda. I will speak in English because my Spanish is very limited. And thank you very much for the opportunity to share with you what we're doing in the Philippines. I speak very fast, so if for the translators, if you see that you don't catch what I'm saying, just make a sign so that I can slow down. I will emphasize two points because I only have 12 minutes. One is on the role of the feminist movements in terms of constructing radical urban alternatives, but also radical transformation in the case of the Philippines. And the second one is the big challenge that the feminist movement in general has to confront in the Philippines. To begin, well, I come from the tradition. There are many feminist movements around the world, and in the case of the Philippines, there are many strands. So I'm coming from the perspective and the experience of grassroots women that looks at the intersection of patriarchy and capitalism and how these two intersections are creating institutions, structures, and powers of domination that perpetuates violence against women and children. And this is basically one of the key tasks of the feminist movements that Ashish and Naya are referring to. The main task of identifying and creating pathway to challenge structural power dynamics that perpetuates this violence and systems of oppression on the one hand, but also on the other, redefining social relationships between men and women, but also on how we see, how we relate with each other in the private sphere and in the public sphere. And this has implications on two major things. One is making the visible invisible. That's the key. That's one of the key goals and key tasks of women, especially when they go into meetings. When we talk about the right to housing, to land tenure, making visible the voices of women in informal work. When it comes to access and control of water, to energy, and making cities safe for women and children and girls, essentially. I live in a city where 1 in every 3 women experience sexual violence and physical harassment. You know, when on a day-to-day basis, and that's really quite a big challenge to address. I just wanted to maybe concretize, for lack of a better word, this challenging structures of power and around the issue of self-reliance and self-autonomy. In one of the urban poor communities where we work with, I think we're like Barcelona, where we're experiencing the bad experiences of privatization, because we've had a privatization for the last 25 years. We tried to remunicipalize and renationalize our water system, but it hasn't been successful as compared to other places. But the experience of the urban poor communities, where in this particular place, it's called Bagong Silang in Caloocan, where there's about 250,000 people living there. They're not being serviced by the private water system because it's very not profitable for the private water company. So the community had to resort to buying water, very expensive water, as much as 1,000 times than if you just connect to the private water system in trucks that go to their community. And we don't know where this water comes from because they're not regulated. So you experience, the community experience like multiple burdens of they don't have enough money to buy the water, but then they have to resort to this, you know, unregulated and very expensive water system. And it was actually the women in the community that started thinking that this cannot be our way of life. So they started organizing themselves together to form a neighborhood association in the form of cooperative and form an associative water system. And they devised a way in terms of how they wanted to to deliver water into their communities in a safe and cheaper way. This means two things. One, that the community assumes the risk of delivering water to the different households. And secondly, constructing a new way of governing and living together. And that included actually, putting daycares, for example, in the neighborhood so that the women can both do the delivery of water service and at the same time take care of the children. So it became it became beyond just getting control or controlling the water and running the community system, because they had to rethink the way that they're living together. And that also involved sharing the responsibility of caring for children within this urban poor community. That's on the one hand. The second hand is that the reality is that they have still to engage the local government and also the private water system, because the water comes from somewhere else. They don't have like a deep water system where they can just extract, and it's really unsustainable. So it's sort of like not exactly a complete transformation, because it's still within a privatized water system. But in a way, it subverts the system in the sense that at the end of the day, it's the community deciding how they wanted to manage and govern their water and also their lives. The second example that I wanted to share in terms of transformation, of how the feminist movement are contributing to radical urban transformation, is around engaging the municipalities and the cities to make cities safe for women and children. And that entails putting in resources to raising awareness around patriarchal values, and also policing in the community to be able, for security for women to go to walk by the street and not to have the fear of being catcalled or being sexually harassed. And a lot of the resources has gone into both mainstream and social media, into raising awareness around violence against women, and also let's call it in English, putting penalties into perpetrators. And that's really a lot. For example, for a big city where I come from, Quezon City, we have 3 million people. I think Barcelona has about 1.6 million population. So it's a huge city to manage, and this is one of the, I think, the biggest successes, or at least gains, of the women's movement, to be able to engage a big city to have this in public policy and also practice. Which leads me to the second and final point on the biggest challenge that we have, which actually undermines this type of alternative public policy making and practices, is that we have a president that's misogynist and sexist, that embodies machismo, that makes rape, makes jokes about rape on a day-to-day basis. And that has far-reaching implications, because basically it goes into the consciousness of people on a day-to-day basis, and all the things that the women's movement, the feminist movement have built over the years are being reversed and undermined very quickly, just in the snap of a hand. And I mean, we've been discussing this on how to address the situation, and there's no other way to challenge this but to come together as feminist movement, as farmers movement, as workers, and to put on the table that this type of president should not go into. Of course, we have many debates on whether we should oust or let him go. But my point is that while we're doing the radical urban transformation, the commoning, and that this is happening in our communities, we really have the biggest challenge of a president that is anti-women. And in a way, I think this kind of relates to the experience of Barcelona, that you have a lot of commoning and radical urban transformation here, but Madrid is perhaps undermining certain things. So we have some parallelisms to that. And the good thing is that just maybe to end before my time runs out. One of the things that we're struggling right now is to confront the impacts of the bloody war on drugs in the Philippines. And It basically perpetuates violence against women because the bloody war on drugs has produced thousands of widows and orphans.